family, welcome back with another oversimplified reaction. So we're moving on with World War II part 2 from Oversimplified. So I recently finished part 1 a few days back, and so far I'm enjoying it, and I can't wait to finish the other parts of this particular video. So guys, if you haven't seen this reaction, I'll leave the video link in the description, so check out the video there, then you can come back to this reaction. So without wasting much time, let's get into it.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community. Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can get an exclusive deal just for Oversimplified viewers.
Part 2.
So what else is happening? Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true. Many Commonwealth nations and other allied colonies had joined the war in Britain's support. They would play a key role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns. On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed a defensive tripartite pact, bringing their military lines even closer together. The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory, but it became a humiliating struggle, and their military ineptitude was put on full display. In the end, they did force the Finns to sue for peace. Then, they continued their honorable campaign of pushing around much smaller countries by annexing the Baltic states and part of northern Romania. France's colonies in equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France.
Wait, let me see. Let me see the African countries that were involved with this.
France's colonies in
I'm always happy that my country didn't have to go through this. This is my country here, Nigeria. The one in blue. Okay, the ones in blue weren't really involved. Thank heavens. I'm always happy for that.
Equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France, except for Gabon, which had to be taken by military force. The Allies also tried to capture the strategic port of Dakar, but that ended in failure. Mussolini had seen Hitler's success,
basically Britain's colonies.
So he tried to take British Somaliland, and that went pretty well. Then he tried to take Egypt, and that went less well. Then he tried to take Greece, and that went really badly. Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly.
The guy couldn't catch a break.
He began favoring a military campaign from the south and started sending British troops to Greece. All of this had Hitler pretty concerned, and he moved to protect his southern flank. He had been getting friendly with Hungary and twisted their arm into signing the tripartite pact and joining the Axis powers.
More countries are joining.
To join for protection against the Soviet Union. The tripartite pact was designed to prevent any other
countries attack any of us, or will attack.
Britain's old ally, the pesky United States of America. When war first broke out, American public opinion was strongly against joining in. In 1940, there was an election. The Republican candidate said, I will not send any young Americans to die in Europe. And sitting President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, I will also not send any young Americans to die in Europe. Unless I have to, then I might. And Roosevelt won. Churchill asked him to join the war, but Roosevelt said, no can do, Winston. But you know what? Here, have some weapons. America began supplying the Allies.
I won't fight with you, but I'm going to help to arm you.
U-boats were sinking thousands of Allied supply ships in the Atlantic, including American ones. If the Germans could sever Britain's supply line, the UK would starve. Throughout the war, the Allies had to come up with better technology to fight the U-boats. Improved radar, aircraft with longer range, better weaponry and convoy tactics. At one point, the man even called a meeting.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
You put them together, you get pykrete. And then he pulled out a gun and shot some wood and it shattered. And then he shot some pykrete.
I never heard of this.
Put someone else in the conference room. Then they tried to make a pykrete aircraft carrier, but that idea was scrapped because that's a really dumb idea. In the end, Alan Turing's codebreakers cracked Germany's Enigma code, and the U-boats gradually became less
Alan
and less
Turing, I've heard that name before.
Britain decided to push Italy out of Egypt. Hey, that was pretty easy, so they kept going. Hitler realized he was going to have to finally step in and do something. He went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and said, hey, I'm going to move troops through you to get to Greece, so either join us or, you know, be invaded. Bulgaria opted to join them. Yugoslavia opted to be invaded. Then Greece finally fell to the joint German-Italian invasion. The British had moved troops from North Africa.
And that was how Germany helped Italy once more.
The British back to Egypt, and they could have kept going, but a small, mostly Australian force held out under siege for 8 months into
Australia?
a strategic port city and disrupting their supply line.
Wow.
Despite having some success,
why don't these guys get mentions when you talk about the heroes of World War II?
Look out.
Surprise invasion.
With 3 million troops, Hitler launched the largest ground invasion in history, and Stalin was far from
ready. History?
Both Churchill and Roosevelt had warned him of an impending attack, but he dug his head in the sand, and the Soviets didn't stand a chance. Germany made staggering progress.
And at this time, they didn't really seem prepared, the Soviet Union.
Numbers of Russian troops. 250,000 at Bialystok, Minsk, 300,000 at Smolensk, nearly 700,000 at Kiev, and again at Vyazma and Bryansk. Leningrad was put under a
That's a
siege that
lot of
lasted
men.
insufferable 4 years. The invasion of Russia had been Hitler's main ideological goal from the beginning, and his hatred for the ethnic peoples there was now unleashed in all its fury. The Eastern
So
Front
what
of the
hate can
Second
make
World
you
War
do?
was brutal for all that endured it. The Germans were now inside of Moscow, and that's it. It's all over. But then it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. Hitler had hoped the Soviets
The
would give up
Russian
before
winter.
but they kept fighting. His commanders came.
I remember Napoleon had, let me take this back a bit. I remember Napoleon had this same issue when he tried to take Russia. That's the thing. It seems like if you want to take Russia, one, I think it seems it's a really big country. Like to take that, I don't know. I don't know if one country can do that. And fine, even if it's not big, it has brutal winters. Like the weather is completely crazy. So I sometimes I wonder, didn't Hitler read history and check, like, okay, whenever people want to take this region, you always have to prepare for the weather? Didn't he read what happened to Napoleon and other didn't he check this? Anyway,
And that's it. It's all over. But then it happened. It got cold.
winter.
Stupid cold. Hitler had hoped the Soviets would give up before winter, but they kept fighting.
Oh,
His commanders came
that's
to him
the
and said,
reason why.
"Can we please dig in for the winter and wait until spring?" No. Keep going. But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles. That's fine. Keep going. We're having to leave the corpses of our frozen horses by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift. Perfectly normal. Keep going. Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies.
Now that's the leader that they want to follow. That doesn't even really care about his men. My neighbors.
He really should have won by now. Then Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were
Good.
no match.
See, that is the first good decision that Stalin made. Since you're fighting with these men who have been slowed down by the winter, it only makes sense for you to call your men from Siberia. And from what I've heard, Siberia is really cold. It's colder than many regions in Russia. So obviously these men will be more used to extreme winters. And it seems like they're wearing white, so they'll probably find it easier to blend into the snow and everything. Now you see? Strategies. It took a while, but eventually Stalin kind of caught up with everything that was happening.
They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end. Germany's victories were staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill.
Well, I keep forgetting Japan was also having, their own war side by side.
But there was a problem. Southeast Asia was heavily colonized by America and Great Britain. It was also full of ocean. Ocean meant naval combat, and there was no way the Japanese Navy could stand up to the US and the UK. So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could destroy their navies before we begin our conquest? And so it was. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese
couldn't take the navies, but you wanted to destroy them first.
Pearl Harbor and inflicted a huge amount of damage. They also attacked British colonies.
Pearl Harbor, I think I've seen a movie about that.
But to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill.
I remember that was like the main crime committed by Japan, and that kind of gave the US an excuse to like enter into the war actively, because in the beginning they really the US didn't really want to they were supporting, but they weren't really active in their roles, in the wars. But with Pearl Harbor, that seemed like that was like their way to get in fully.
Declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval bases.
Wait, for those who speak Japan, what does this mean?
Declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a...
What does this word mean? I'll see if I can check it. I don't know. Does it mean like victory or something?
Big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon. In the meantime, though,
that was another mistake from Japan.
They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march.
They took lots of regions, lots of land.
And they were now threatening
Look at that sphere of influence.
victory had been as staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a defined war which they were destined to win. But their victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them.
See?
For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers. In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust.
This period destroyed lots of lives. Jewish people, non-Jewish people.
And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy. He wanted to focus on the south. His plan was to cut off the Russian armies in the Caucasus, an area full of oil, and then invade the Caucasus.
Once again,
His forces moved across the north with ease, and Hitler got cocky.
These men will do anything for oil.
Early, leaving the Sixth Army to complete the encircling movement alone. To do so, the Sixth Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city.
That seemed like a mistake.
The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held up the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war,
destroyed
which
buildings.
bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft and getting the Soviet army to scratch. Now,
see, even though Stalin couldn't really had issues in the beginning of the war, as time went on, he did get a grip of reality. Like, okay, we really have to defeat these people.
But Hitler said, no, you stay.
He told his generals to stay.
The entire Sixth Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler elsewhere. With America now in the war, Allied bombing over German cities reached devastating levels. In Africa, the British had pushed Rommel back again. Then they were pushed back again, and finally, after a decisive battle at El Alamein, and with American and British troops arriving in the west, the Germans and Italians were squeezed out of Africa. Japan was also already seeing its rapid success being turned around. They attempted to
Everyone was getting a hit of reality at this point.
Actually, they sank a lot of them. It was a battle from which the Japanese Navy would never
Midway.
recover. British, Indian, and Chinese troops held the line in the harsh jungle terrain of Burma, and the Japanese suffered losses in the
Even
Solomon
India,
Islands.
I didn't know this.
They were not invincible.
Indian troops fought in the war.
The Allies had to decide their next move.
They don't mention that much.
To attack from the south, while the Americans preferred a full sea invasion in northern France. All right, said the Americans, we'll do it your way. Allied forces successfully landed in Sicily and began moving north. They also carried out bombing raids over Rome. The thing was, many of the people in Sicily had relatives living in America, and they greeted the American troops quite warmly. With the war reaching home territory, most Italians just weren't that into it, and Mussolini was suddenly very...
Why would they be into it? At this point, everyone's probably tired. It wasn't really Italy's war, to be honest. And it's still, look at Mussolini still yelling war. Not anymore.
Popular. He was voted out by his own fascist Grand Council and was toppled from power. Italy immediately began negotiations.
What else do you expect?
Hitler wasn't surprised and had already sent reinforcements southward. In an operation he ironically called Operation Axis, German troops quickly disarmed Italian troops in the north. The Allies continued fighting the Germans up through Italy, but then winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt. All right, said the Americans, let's do it our way as well. Germany had made
let's see.
a lot of enemies, and millions of Allied troops had been gathering in England.
Wait, what?
Winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt. All right,
I need to check that again. How many enemies? Belligerents. There's Germany on the right. Look at all the countries on the left. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Free French forces, Polish forces, French resistance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 already. Australia, Belgium, Free Belgian forces, Free Czechoslovakia forces, Free Greek forces. That's 10. Free Luxembourg forces 11. Free Dutch forces 12. New Zealand 13. Free Norwegian 14. Danish sailors 15. That's 15. No. Some people try to. If Germany had done this, they would have won. No. There's no way they would have won with this. Even if they won, even if they had victories in that particular year, 1945, they would still have lost. It's just they just made enemies with too many people.
And millions millions of Allied troops had been gathering in England as factories worked around the clock producing the war material needed for a
Around the
super
clock.
massive, the likes of which the world has never seen before invasion of Europe.
Wow.
The Germans knew an Allied invasion would come, but they didn't know where it would land. Thanks to
How
Allied
many people will you fight with? How many men?
But the Allies were really going to land in Normandy because it was less fortified and the beaches were nicer. Under the careful planning of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the invasion that had been long in the making was just about ready to go. Just one thing was preventing the launch: the British weather. For a short while, everyone sat around waiting for a decent day, and then it came. On the night of June 5th, over 1,000 bombers took off and raided coastline defenses, while paratroopers were dropped inland in a bit of a chaotic operation, tasked with sabotaging defenses and capturing key bridges to stop any German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Early the next morning, the barrage
makes sense.
Allied ships fired a huge number of shells at the German fortifications, and then the landings. The Americans at Utah and Omaha, the British at Golden Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. It was a tremendous struggle with a great loss of life, particularly at Omaha, but the Allied troops captured the beaches and the landings were a success.
Hey, Omaha. I've heard of Omaha. Isn't that the correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, I might be saying rubbish right now. But isn't that the beach? Okay, yeah, that was also a beach. Isn't that the beach that the troops landed in what's the name of this movie? The movie with Tom Hanks. Saving Private Ryan. I think it was in one of these. It was Omaha. I remember the movie had, in the beginning of the movie, there was a lot of death in the beach. I don't know if it's this same incident. Please comment below if it's this same incident, or if I'm wrong, just let me know. But please comment below. I think it's this one because I remember it was called Omaha. And I remember thinking then, like, why is it called Omaha if it's in France or something? Maybe it was like a code name or something. I don't know. But please comment if I'm right on this. Let's move on.
Inland. They took the port of Cherbourg and the city of Caen. The Americans moved south to capture Brittany. Then, in a massive disaster for the Germans, British and Canadian troops from the north and Americans from the south trapped the German 7th Army in a near wipeout encircling movement. In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne. Paris was liberated, and the Germans...
It would be crazy if that was a real story.
In the Far East, the Allies started to push the Japanese out of Burma, as the Americans launched a two-pronged offensive in the Pacific. In the south, General MacArthur led the push to liberate the Philippines, while General Nimitz oversaw the brutal island-hopping campaign. American forces had to make hard-fought landing after hard-fought landing on fiercely defended small islands as they moved steadily towards the Japanese mainland. The Japanese believed that the greatest thing a person could do was to die in battle, and the most dishonorable act was to surrender. As a result, they fought ferociously.
What kind of brainwashing is that?
Got to the mainland, the more ferocious the resistance became. In
Iwo
February
Jima.
1945, the Americans captured the island of Iwo Jima, and an intense firebombing campaign of Japan's wooden cities began. The Allies suffered some setbacks trying to liberate the Netherlands, but they were making progress and were now threatening the industrial heartland of Germany. Hitler's health, both mentally and physically, was rapidly deteriorating. Things were looking bad, and he was desperate. He said, "We need to turn this thing around, and I have just the trick. Remember a few years back when we blitzkrieged through the Ardennes and trapped the Allied forces in Belgium? Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Again." He gathered his forces and tried to pound them through the Ardennes. He used up the remainder of Germany's strength and resources, and he managed to create quite a nice
The remainder of Germany's... You could have just used this time to retreat and save the lives of so many men. You know you are going to lose, and you are still fighting.
They want to surrender? No, sir. They want us to surrender. Nuts. And that's what they sent off
Wait,
as their official saying.
what did he say?
Or be enough the remainder of Germany's strength and resources, and he managed to create quite a nice bulge. He also trapped some American forces in the Belgian town of Bastogne. The Germans sent the trapped Americans a message saying surrender or be annihilated. When it was read out to the commanding officer, he said, "They want to surrender? No, sir. They want us to surrender." Nuts. And that's what they sent off as their official reply. General Patton's Third Army...
Is that a real story?
Southwest, and the Germans were pushed back.
Please, if that's a real story, please can you just put it in the comments? There's so many details that I don't know about, like the major ones maybe, but some little details. I don't know if he's just, I don't know if Oversimplified is just overreacting, you know, because he does that sometimes. But if that really happened, if he really replied them with nuts, he sent that back, please let me know if that really happened. Okay.
And what followed was a total collapse of the German forces. The Allies pushed into Germany from both sides. The Soviet Union took Warsaw and kept pushing to Berlin. In his bunker, Hitler realized all hope was lost. Berlin fell, and with it, Hitler's dreams of a great German empire. Two of the Axis nations had been knocked out, one to go. The Americans
Oh,
began their assault
Japan.
on Okinawa, the last island before they would reach the Japanese mainland. The desperate Japanese fought hard, launching kamikaze attacks on the U.S. ships. The citizens of Okinawa suffered through the
Kamikaze
terrible fighting, but
attacks.
in 2
Isn't
months,
that
the island was captured.
the
The Allies
suicide
now had to make a choice. Either
the
continue the
suicide
devastating struggle up the
planes,
Japanese
I
mainland,
think.
or they could try to coerce the Japanese into surrendering now. In July, the first successful atomic bomb test took place in New Mexico, and the destructive weapon was ready for use. America and the UK were also seeing the Soviet Union not so much liberating as occupying its captured territories, and so they wanted to put on a show of force. On August
Really?
6th, the A-bomb fell on Hiroshima. Then, on the 9th, Nagasaki.
I can't imagine
The
that
cities were
happening
reduced to rubble.
in
And
my
for the people living
own
there, it was
region.
a terrible fate. But for the Allies,
I've
they
seen the
achieved their main
pictures.
aim. In September, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender, saying the war situation has developed not necessarily
The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Can you imagine? You are saying this after how many of Japanese people, after how many of your people have died? Can you imagine these leaders? The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan. Imagine if my own government told me that after I've lost like 3 of my brothers in the war. It's now you are realizing it won't develop necessarily into Japan's advantage. This sentence is like an insult.
to Japan's advantage. After 6 years, war was finally over.
Oh, this
The Allies
picture.
occupied Japan for 8 years. The Emperor was allowed to keep his position, but General MacArthur made sure this picture was printed.
Imagine that guy's happiness kissing that lady. Like the war is over.
The Emperor was not the divine, powerful being they had believed. Germany was divided between America, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. In 1949, the Allied sectors were united into West Germany. The Second World War had been more terrible and destructive than the first. In its aftermath, 2 major superpowers with 2 very different ideologies had come out victorious, and the tension between the 2 of them would create a new kind of war. A very, very cold one.
The
Wow,
Cold
Churchill, that
War.
looks just like me. And your acting's
I think.
doing really well. And this quesadilla you made is to die for. How'd you learn to do all this stuff? I used the link in the description to get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents.
the
Wow,
ad.
tell me more. Okay. Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 19,000...
Okay, I've seen this ad in the other videos. Whew. Okay. Finally, we finished World War II. Great video, great video. Wow, there were lots of things. Unlike World War One, that I didn't really know much of the details. World War Two, there were lots of details that I already read about, but there were still lots and lots of details that I didn't know about. Mostly on the Japanese side, I didn't really read much. I know about the defeat and whatever, but I didn't really read much about the Japanese side. It was mostly about the old European whatever. But it's just, I keep trying to, it's very hard to grasp in your mind. It's very hard to grasp how the world was in that period. Like how all these people, including the casualties, the collateral damage, there's so many people who didn't even fight and they still had their towns, their cities, their sons, their daughters, their kids, their husbands destroyed. All because of what a few men in power think. Their own kids are mostly alive. Their own kids mostly survived the war. Their kids' kids are mostly alive today. And look at the people who they killed, that they just cut off from the earth. It's crazy. Sometimes I wonder why. Why do people fight these wars? Like, you are on this earth, you can't, like, I don't know how to explain it. Have people seen the picture of what the earth looks like from outside? How insignificantly quiet we look. And then on earth, everybody is just trying to just dominate and dominate and dominate. Like, in the end, the earth has the world has more power than we do. Anything can happen to us. Sickness. Look at this pandemic. Anything can happen that can just wipe everybody out, and yet we're still concerned with fighting for land, fighting for whose government is better. My region is better than yours. We're stronger. It's just, that period was just a complete waste of lives. But anyway, it doesn't take out the fact that lots of people sacrificed themselves, even those who are still alive, even those who survived the war. The Americans, the British, everyone that fought against the Axis side, everyone that fought against evil, or even all the Africans, not my country, but other African countries that did fight against evil. Um, Thank you to all of you, because I can't even imagine how the world would have been if the Axis side won. So thank you everybody for your service and everything you did, including those that have died, including those that are still alive. Thank you very much. So great video, guys. Thanks for staying with me this long. Thanks for hanging around. Please guys, like this video, subscribe if you're new, and comment on other videos that you want me to react to. Either drop a comment in the comment section, or you can leave it in my email. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.